174 years ago, on this hallowed ground, a battle took place between 300 Navy men who were marching through Alameda with the intent of taking Pueblo de Los Angeles under the Mexican-American War in 1846. 70 Californios, Spanish-born in California, would actually meet the Navy men here under the grounds of the Rancho San Pedro, and would actually have a 2-day skirmish where the 70 Californios were managed to outmaneuver and succeed to defeating the 300 Navy men. This is equally important to that of the battles of the American Revolution and that of the Civil War. This is California history, and this is South Bay history.
At this place, on October 8th and 9th, 1846, a 2-day battle, a skirmish, one of 5 battles that were fought for the capture of California by the Americans, was fought right here. President Polk had failed in his attempt to buy California, so instead he invaded California in 3 directions. General Kearny, Army of the West, walking from Fort Leavenworth, Captain John C. Fremont from the north, and the Pacific Squadron, 7 naval ships here off the coast. And 1 naval ship, the U.S. Savannah, disembarked here in the harbor of San Pedro.
The Pacific Squadron was stationed off the coast, and when they heard the Mexican War was declared, they were ordered to take all the towns in Los Angeles. And that was in July of '46, and they were able to do that without firing a shot. Every town, they were able to march in and just take them. There was no, Mexican troops here at all. It was just the local people, and then later local ranchers and vaqueros and stuff became the troops for the Californios here.
And 299 sailors and Marine Dragoons walked up Alameda in the attempt to capture the Pueblo of Los Angeles for a second time, because they already had been captured, but they had been kicked out.
It was a second victory for the Californios and for Mexico. The Californios had the home field advantage because they knew the only way to get through Los Angeles from the San Pedro was a trail that the Americans had to take. So they knew where they were coming, they knew how to reach them, and so they deployed their 1 cannon.
It's named the Old Woman's Gun because when the Americans attempted to capture the city the second time, the local militia, only having old arms from their grandfathers that had founded the missions, needed a cannon to fire at these Americans, and they had hid a cannon in Reyes's yard on First and Alameda. And so the battle got named after her because of the cannon, the importance of the cannon in the battle.
Attached it to a cart, a wooden-made cart, and they used that to fire a grape shot at the U.S. forces.
The cannon was originally just a ceremonial gun, but any cannon, if you put rocks or whatever in it, it'll become a weapon. So they brought it here to Domínguez, and they had it on a little homemade carriage, and they dragged it with their horses. So it was able to be really mobile. And so the Californians at about 2 or 2:30 in the morning, they said that they started firing, keeping the Americans awake. Nobody was hurt by any of the cannon fire, but they were all shooken up and awake, and they thought they were going to be attacked.
And so what they would do, they would show themselves. For the first day, they were annoying the American forces. And on the march up, it was hot, it was dry, they didn't have a lot of water. The Americans weren't too happy.
Back then, too, a lot of the sailors, they had really poor footwear because they were just made to walking around on decks. But when they landed here, all their shoes were, their shoe was basically a piece of leather with canvas on it. And when they marched for maybe 10 miles or so, they started falling apart on them.
Right here when they got to the house, right here in front of Compton Creek, the local Mexican militia under the command of Jose Antonio Carrillo had assembled enough men and horses to prevent the Americans from crossing and capturing the city.
When the Americans reached about 400 yards, they were formed into a group, a square, which is to repel a cavalry charge, but the Californios didn't charge. They fired their cannon and then were fired by their muskets. They let their muskets do all the fighting. They would retreat, reload, and keep on doing this over and over again.
And of course, the Californios were all on horseback, the Americans were on foot, and they just couldn't see ahead of themselves because the vegetation was so tall. and they couldn't tell how many enemy troop was ahead. They didn't know if there was, 100 or 500 or 1,000. They couldn't tell. And the Californians on horseback, they're riding circles around the Americans, so they're thinking there's tons of guys out there. They're dragging branches, kicking up dust. So the Americans really thought they were going into a big, formidable enemy in front of them. And they brought out the cannon and were firing at the Americans. And for 3 charges, the Americans were trying to take that gun. And every time the Americans would get within reach of grabbing that gun and taking it, the Californians would lasso it and drag it away, and then they'd run after it and they couldn't catch it.
The U.S. forces finally realized that there was no way they were going to reach Los Angeles, and they retreated back to the harbor and back to the USS Savannah.
And of course, after this battle, they were ordered down to San Diego, and then from San Diego, they were ordered to march on foot all the way back up here, which was over 125 miles. The second march, when they came from San Diego, they were smart. They brought artillery with them. So that was they learned a lesson here. So they brought the artillery with them. But to me, it's just amazing for these sailors and Marines, and then also Army guys met up with them, the Dragoons, that they marched all the way up here in enemy country.
To me, it's a very significant event because of the 5 battles it's won, where the Mexicans won, and also the locals showed the Americans that, we're not going to take it anymore. You can't just walk into our towns and tell us what to do. This event is forgotten. People just drive down Alameda all the time and they don't know what happened here. But again, it's one of 5 events that will lead to the capitulation of Mexican California to the Americans in 1847.
It was there was a lot of side notes, a lot of funny tales about the battle that a lot of people don't hear about. It was an important battle because it's about California history that our kids don't read about today. So it's very important that we do things like this to educate people to know that the Mexican-American War actually happened here in California and in our backyards, and it's an important tale to tell. By doing living history enactments, we were able to tell all the little tiny details, like sending messages on the dog to the Californians riding behind the Americans and picking up used cannonball and riding back and shooting them again. There's all kinds of neat little stories behind it, a lot of rich history. So by doing this, I think it's important that we educate everybody so they really know what goes on, and a little bit more of what happened to our history here in California.
America invaded California to displace a black governor. 300 U.S. Marines came through the port of San Pedro to carry out Fremont's objective. Take Los Angeles and Mexican Pueblo. Hey man, the old woman's gone. Got the Americans on the run. California was free that day.